Hey guys, what is going on? Welcome back to the channel. Let's get right down to it. So we'll save all the craziness that Playmaji and the Polymega have been through in the last year and a half, but I come to you with good news. Playmaji officially started the retail parade. Yes, they had a falling out with Walmart. Who knows who's at fault? Probably both. Doesn't matter. Playmaji officially started selling their retail copies of their controllers on their website. This is for the Nintendo, Genesis, TurboGrafx, and Super Nintendo modules. And to basically test the site and the company and the product, because I should hopefully be getting mine in a couple weeks, actually, if there's no more delays, I wanted to see if they put their money, if they put their mouth where my money went. I'm sure that sounded worse in post, but whatever. So they are offering their retail controllers for $30 a piece on Polymega.com. I bought one of each because I wanted to see if, after all this time, if it was worth it. And the results are wonderful. But there is a caveat, and we'll get to that in the video. So, rather than do crazy hocus pocus and stuff like that, I'm just going to pop the camera down and I will take you guys through my experiences with the controllers, holding controllers in my hands, just so you can get an idea of what to expect if you're interested in this system or the controllers. Let's get to it. All right, guys, let's start with the packaging. So I'm going to use the Super Nintendo version for the display. Basically, retail packaging is your simple cardboard box. It's actually pretty thick, not as thin as some of the other, AAA game systems I've seen. So that's really nice. Very nice jet black, little glossy print on the controller. Very cool. All the controllers come packaged like this. So you got that really cool packaging all around. My only complaint as far as graphic designer concerns go is that the text is really, really, really small. It was only until I was doing the framing for the camera that I could actually start to read some of this stuff. But that aside, I really love the packaging. It's really simple. When you open up the box, there will be a spacer. You just take that out. And then the controller is wrapped up in good old standard foam, and you're good to go. Real simple. The divider keeps everything in place. None of the controllers were moving around when I pulled them out of the shipping carton. Really, really nice. They look really, really good on display shelf. So, before we go to the Super Nintendo, we are going to start with the original Nintendo. Obviously, this is the original specimen. Good to go, blah, blah, blah. This is the Polymega version. Now, the big thing that people have been talking about so far has been the location of the start and select buttons. I can tell you firsthand, it doesn't matter, and I'll get to that in a moment. But the first thing I realized when I pulled the controller out of the box was this. Polymega, or should I say Playmaji, actually added grips to the bottom of the controller, and it gives this really, really nice feel to it. It doesn't feel like you're just holding a slab. Like, there's an actual nice contour to it. Very comfortable. Second, and this is what blew me away, I've been looking at these pictures for a year and a half, and I was like, oh, cool, the buttons are, they're not altered. They're diagonal. No biggie, whatever. It wasn't until I started testing the controller that when I held it, I realized that this is the greatest design I've ever seen. With your thumbs placed naturally, your one thumb now has access to all three buttons, start, A, and B, all at once. When you're playing games like Mario, I tested out Mario Brothers 3 and Batman on the NES. When you have moments where you have to run or hold a button while doing something else, it is so freaking comfortable. Like, there's no stress, there's no nothing. It's fully natural. Like, if you're playing Mario, you just hold on to run and then jump as you're playing. Really nice. In games where you have to press the start to access a menu, there's no more like kind of taking your thumb off and moving. You just go, all good. With the select button, I noticed that this hand's muscle memory after 30 years This one's going to take a little bit to get used to because you're so used to just going like this that you just like have a brain fart and have to like go like this. But after playing Metroid and Batman, which I think uses it for pause, you do get used to it. It's all good. The Polymega button on a standard, like when you're playing on the actual NES system, across all the controllers, this acts as an extra start button. So basically, while you're trying to get used to muscle memory, you can actually just press that to pause the game or open up a menu based on the game you're playing. I will say this was the first controller I pulled out when I got the 4 of them, and this is the one that impressed me the most as far as like innovation, changing up the things and things they probably had to do to, not be a copyright similar. I cannot express how much joy I feel using this controller. Like this diagonal setup is absolutely phenomenal, and I can actually see using this as my default NES controller from here on out when I'm playing. Other nice things that go across the controllers are braided cord. Feels really nice and smooth. All of them also have little Velcro tie attached to them, so easy wiring, easy cleanup when you're done playing. With the Nintendo controller, my only real concern with this guy is that the tip, the actual plug, the plastic doesn't feel cheap, but like, I don't know how to explain it. Like I've had third-party controllers before where this literally split in half. Like, so it's just the wires. It's not that it's not bad. It's just, I don't know, maybe I'm just having shell shock from the other third-party controller. But overall, first impressions, with the controller, I played Super Mario Bros. 3 and Batman to test out the button throw and the pressing and so forth. Absolutely played like butter. Absolutely amazing. I played Final Fantasy 1 and Metal Gear to see how the actual cardinal directions worked. Perfect across the board. In playing Metroid and, like I said, Batman, doing this instead of this is going to take some time for your muscle memory to get rid of, but I cannot stress how much more comfortable it is holding it like this. Just super impressed with it. I am so happy I got this. This is really cool. The other thing that I should point out is that unlike the buttons on the NES controller, which are concave, meaning they dip in, on all of the controllers for the Polymega, all the buttons are rounded. So very easy to slide between the two of them if you're playing different things. I'll talk more about that when I get to the 16-bit controllers, but absolutely worth the $29. This was absolutely awesome. In my order of opening controllers, the next one was the Super Nintendo. Now, obviously, they were going after the core feature here. So their controller is more or less mimicking Super Nintendo. Obviously, these guys are moved out of the way for the Polymega button. Same braided controller. This guy feels fine. Super happy with that. Just like the Nintendo controller, though, when you first hold it, you realize they put what I'll just call legs on the bottom of the controller. And when you hold it, these fingers suddenly don't feel like they're in the way of each other anymore. Like it's super comfortable to hold. It takes a little bit of pressure off your wrists. I can't say how much I really cannot stress how much of a difference that actually makes. Now, as I mentioned before, the buttons are rounded. Shoulder buttons are standard stuff. These actually feel a little bit better than this one. Like, it's the same throw, but this one's got like almost like a Neo Geo controller click to it. I like it a lot. Now, the main difference with this one, and I know some people are gonna, rah about it, but trust me, it makes a difference. On the Nintendo D-pad, it's just slightly concave, just slightly. On Playmaji's, it's got a little bit more. Like, we're talking like barely noticeable at first, but once you get into the game, you realize that your thumb doesn't like come off the pad, especially like if you have oily skin or sweat a lot while playing a fighting game. Your thumb isn't going off the chart, off the thing, etc. Really nice, good clicky sound, good button throw, nice button clicks. With the Super Nintendo, I was going to record game footage, and it turns out that my Nintendo has really bad jail bars after not playing it for 5 years, and then my Super Nintendo's graphic chip died. So when I was playing this, half the screen, the graphics were garbled, the other half were fine, so I could still play the games normally, but they just looked terrible. With the Super Nintendo controller, I the first game I had was Killer Instinct. I have very few games left for the Super Nintendo and Nintendo because I sold most of them off since I'm a CD person. But with Killer Instinct, I cannot stress how comfortable this was to play. I was using Jago and Orchid as my test characters for both the charge moves and the quarter circle moves, and everything plays fine. Absolutely wonderful. I was doing a couple combos I had never been able to do before with Orchid, so that was pretty cool. I played UN Squadron as far as like bullet hell type games would go. Played fine. Played Ninja Turtles in Time. Absolutely perfect. The presses for doing the throw the character at the screen came out just fine. Doing the body back and forth body slam came out fine every time. Just really, really cool. There's also a really cool touch that I'll talk about in a second, but you might have seen it when I was looking at the box. So we'll get to that in a moment. Now, with the most of the controllers, you obviously get where Playmaji was getting their inspiration from, but it's the TurboGrafx one that made me smile the most. When I first saw that they were doing the 6-button controller, I was ecstatic, because if you've never played imports or collected imports before, this is the controller they were going after with their controller. This is the Avenue Pad 6. NEC and AV released this in Japan at the time that they released Street Fighter 2 Dash for the PC Engine. This controller is essentially just for the arcade card games and Street Fighter 2, which was a normal Hue card. Basically, your 3 kicks, your 3 punches, start and select as usual. This button here, although it's marked A and B on this controller, it's properly marked on Polymegas. This would switch you between 2-button mode and full 6-button mode. Now, what's important to know, and I didn't realize this until someone brought it up, is that the Avenue pad itself only has 2 turbo settings, on and off. The original TurboGrafx controllers and the Turbo Duo controllers had 2 turbo settings. So when we first realized that the Polymega controller was missing the extra turbo setting, it was like, that sucks. And then when I picked this up to start recording the video, I was like, wait a minute, it doesn't suck. They actually did it perfectly. The only thing not on Polymega's controller is the slow motion button, but literally all slow motion on any controller ever is just the controller pressing the start button super fast. And when you have a home button on your emulation system, that's not going to fly. So it doesn't really matter about that. I love this controller. Even though I sold off Street Fighter and the adapter years ago, I kept this just because I love the feel of it. When I pulled out the Polymega version, it's amazing! Just like the other controllers, all the buttons are rounded and not concave. I really, really do like the rounded better. Like your thumb just flows better as it's moving back and forth. As you can see, the 2 turbo buttons have now been really coded down below, on and off, all nice and good to go. This guy is your correct mark. As you can see, it's marked 6-button and 2-button. So when it came out of the box, it was automatically set to the 6-button. You will want to press that to 2-button right away before you play any of the American Hue card games, because 6-button will not work. I shouldn't say it will not work, but it may have weird effects. So turn that to 2-button and you're good to go. Just like the other controllers, little grippy grips on the bottom, braided controller, real nice. I played Ninja Spirits, played like butter. I tried, really important. So, a little nerd dive here. When Forgotten Worlds came out for the TurboGrafx, the Forgotten Worlds was a 3-button game. It was fire, and then rotate one direction, and then rotate in the opposite direction. When the game came out for the Turbo Duo only had the 4 buttons like the NES. So it was rotate, fire, and then rotate, or you chose a different option to where it automatically fired, and then this was your rotating 2 buttons. On the Polymega, when you're in 2-button mode, button 3 acts as the run button. So when you're playing Forgotten Worlds now, instead of having to deal with a run button, you can actually use all three of these guys for fire, rotate, and rotate opposite direction. It plays so nice now. Oh my God, I couldn't tell you how much I hated using the run button in that thing. Obviously the menu button, well, what's funny is technically in two button mode, since this is now run, you technically have 3 run buttons, which is kind of funny. The select button would probably be the only real issue I could see, but again, just like the Nintendo controller, it's just a quick lean up, you're all good. In some games, like Forgotten Worlds, this would be pause. Riot Zone, I think it's pause as well. Also nice is Riot Zone, plays fantastic. Because this is now the run button, you have access to your super. So it's literally just punch, jump, or I think it's punch, yeah, it's punch and jump, and then special move, which your special move is basically just pressing these 2 guys together, but now you can just, oh, so nice. Really, really, really happy with this guy. I am so glad they went with the 6-button controller. If you don't have an arcade card for your Turbo Duo or Turbo Graphics, literally you'll never use the full 6 buttons. But, and this is the important part that I'll save for the Genesis controller. All right, guys. So I saved the Sega controller for last because that's the one that had the caveat, if you will. So before I jump into this, every new system in history will always have an issue. Sometimes it's the disk's not reading. Sometimes it's bad printing. For certain systems, like the original 3DO controller where it didn't have diagonals, or the Nintendo Switch where it's got the Joy-Con drift, there's going to be an issue. I am hoping against all hope that this was just a one-off with mine and not an actual manufacturing issue. But if it is the latter, it's an easy fix. So that said, we'll start with the good stuff. Just like the other controllers, Playmaji was going for the emulation of the source material. And from that matter, they succeeded beautifully. Just like all the other controllers, they did add a rather robust, especially on this one, a very robust set of handles, or legs as I call them on the other one. And it really allows your hand to just automatically conform to the shape. So it's really nice. Got a really good throw handle on everything. It's all good. Unlike Sega's pad, where they used smaller buttons for the X, Y, and Z, Playmaji went full button size. Very nice. All good. The mode button is there. On theirs, it's just a little dot. For those that are of the younger generation that have no idea what I'm talking about, when the original arcade pad came out, some of the older 3-button games would not function correctly if you were playing it in default. So before you turn the system on, you'd have to hold this button down. It would essentially have the 6-pad reboot into a 3-button controller so those classic games could work. There are a select set of games, very small set, that will not work with this controller at all. But I'll get to that when we go back to the normal view. So mode button's all good. Good to go. Here's where the issue came in. The first game I threw in to try was Samurai Showdown, and I was doing okay, but I've never really been good at Samurai Showdown, even though I have all of them on the Neo Geo. So I was like, screw it, I'll throw in Fatal Fury. I'm really good at Fatal Fury. I first picked Terry Bogard, and I was doing okay, and blah, 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 and I noticed something was wrong. I couldn't figure out what it was. So I went back to the player select screen, I grabbed my Shiranui. If you've never played Fatal Fury, my Shiranui has 2 quarter circle motion moves she can do. There's a fireball and what I'll just call a flame spin. The flame spin goes backwards, the fireball goes forward. When I started playing with her, I realized every time I went to do the flame spin, it would not come out. I could walk backwards, I could crouch, but for whatever reason, the diagonal wasn't registering. I also noticed at the time that the controller was clicking really loud, especially in this area of the controller. So with my still, I leapt over the opponent to player's 2 side, and suddenly I couldn't do the fan, but I could do the flame skirt, or the fire spin. Flame skirt. For the fire spin, which meant for sure there was something wrong with the thing. Now, practically every controller on Earth with a D-pad, it's literally just a piece of plastic, the little diode plastic, and then the circuit board. So I took the controller apart, and the D-pad was fine, the plastic diodes were fine. The circuit board was fine. It was all perfect. I couldn't figure out what was going on. It wasn't until I grabbed the shell and flipped it over to make sure I hadn't missed any screws that I found the culprit. On the shell, I'm on the right side, right? Yeah. On the shell, there are 4 columns that jut up to support the D-pad. And then over here, there are 2 to support the platform for the buttons. On my controller, the column for the left press is actually a smidge taller than the surrounding 3. So as I was pressing, because the circuit board wasn't flush, like let's say this is the taller of the 2, wasn't flush, it was actually probably being bent down. So I was basically pressing down on the circuit board. Bad touch. But here's the funny thing. I took out a little, what do you call it? I took out a credit card to see how off it was. And oddly enough, it was the width of a credit card difference. So I got an idea. Using an expired credit card, I cut the corner out. And when I put the corner of the credit card on the 3 smaller columns, it was flush, literally a flat surface next to that left column. So I taped the little piece of credit card on the thing, put the controller back together, and sure as shit, this thing is now not only quiet, it's perfect. I was doing desperation moves in Fatal Fury. In Samurai Showdown, I hit every fireball and uppercut with Haumaru you could do. I tried using, I can't think of the name now, the boxer with the charge moves. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. So, with that being said, if you do buy a controller, you're going to have to open the Genesis one to make sure it doesn't have the manufacturing issue I did. Now, my fix was clearly just a MacGyver because I was in the moment. I wanted to test it out and so forth. Because you would only have to take off the shell for the repair, literally all Playmaji or anyone with a 3D printer would have to do is basically just 3D print a little platform that has a hole to latch onto the left peg, and then on the bottom have 3 little indented things that would rest on the 3 other pads, and it will create the platform perfectly. It's literally a 5 to 10 cent fix for what would be a $30 issue. Yeah, you have to knock the controller because of that issue, but like I said, once you actually fix it like that, this is gorgeous. I could totally see using this. And that's basically the gist of it. I have to admit, I was shocked at how much I love these controllers. Like, the Nintendo controller really is that good. The Sega controller issue aside, I'm hoping it's just like a weird, goof on my controller's part, but it's an easy fix either way. Now, the part I left out in the controller review section of the video is cross-compatibility. And it is one of the coolest things about the Polymega. And what do I mean by that? So when you have your TurboGrafx controller, to plug this in, you would have the TurboGrafx module plugged in. The modules themselves are essentially just really fancy cartridge adapters. You can plug it in to physically play your cartridge without installing it to the system. But let's say you have a bunch of Genesis and Super Nintendo games installed. If you have your Super Nintendo module plugged in, you can then just use the Super Nintendo controller to play your Genesis games. You don't have to switch the modules unless you want to use the Genesis controller. While the base controller with the analog sticks, while that itself is cross-compatible across all the games, what's really cool, and I am basing this on watching other people play from the beta, if you have the Genesis, the TurboGrafx, or the Super Nintendo modules plugged in, if I'm reading the box correctly and understanding what was going on in the beta videos, if you have the Sega Genesis module plugged in, but you want to play Street Fighter on your PlayStation thing, you can use the 6-button Genesis controller to play your PlayStation fighting game, which means instead of using the clunky 4 buttons and double shoulders, you would now have, in my case with the TurboGrafx module, one of the best 6-button controllers in history to play some of the best Street Fighter games in history. Holy crap. Now, it obviously isn't 1,000% universal. Like, I believe the Nintendo controller can only be used for basically the Nintendo controller would act as your regular PC Engine controller for 2 buttons, as long as you had, games installed or purchased off their eventual eShop if they're available. I cannot tell you how excited I am to use a Super Nintendo 4-button controller on my Neo Geo CD games, because as much as I love the Neo Geo CD, I hate the controllers. I'm terrible on a joystick, and the Neo Geo CD controller is just freaking wacky-tastic. Like, I'm so happy. Like, it's going to be a good time. With that said, I am obviously open for questions or comments. The system should hopefully be launching and releasing at the end of February, so I should have mine in about a month, willing. If you guys have any questions or comments about the controllers, I do have the full Sega CD set, and I do have the full TurboGrafx American set. My play testing options are slim as far as Super Nintendo and Nintendo games go. So, yeah. If you have any questions, let me know. I will gladly answer them, etc. I will be building a Polymega page on Game-Rave.com. While its main function will be for mainly PlayStation compatibility, ifs, answers, things like that, I'll also have a quick note, because some of the older, as I mentioned in the video, some of the older games with the Sega Genesis 6-button and the TurboGrafx 6-button might have compatibility issues if you forget to turn the mode button or the 6 to 2-button switch. So I'm just trying to make it as easy as possible for people that want to check it out. Like I said, questions or comments, hit me up below. I love you guys. Be safe. Stay warm. It's like 1 degree out as I'm recording this. Take care, you guys. Have a great week. I'll see you next episode.